What's going on, everyone?
What's going on, guys? This is the Rivian Report Podcast, episode 1. I'm Alex,
I'm Dan.
and let's get into why we're starting this podcast, because obviously it's a new podcast. And if you're joining, you're probably curious what it's going to be about other than just Rivian. Dan, why don't you take it away with why we're starting the podcast?
Well, we're starting the podcast because we think that Rivian is an awesome company with a lot of potential, and we want to help educate people because some of the information, some of the news is kind of pushed to the side and doesn't get the mainstream, attention that it deserves.
Definitely.
Because there are some really big things coming out of Rivian lately, and we just want to make sure everybody knows about it.
Yeah, exactly. And if anyone's followed Tesla along the way, there's a YouTube channel, Tesla Daily by Rob Maurer, that me and Dan have followed for a long time. And it's if you're invested in Tesla stock, it was definitely on down days and things. A source where you could kind of like see what's going on with the company, what's the news. Keep the community motivated about the mission. News that wouldn't be, like Dan said, as easily accessible, especially with the main media a lot of times putting out a lot of FUD. So, we don't really think there's that much for Rivian that exists on YouTube that would be relatable to like Tesla Daily is for Tesla, or all the content that exists around Tesla, since Rivian's a much smaller company than Tesla is, and the community is still at early stages growing. So we want to basically make this podcast to talk about Rivian, not just the company and its news, but also the stock. And yeah, anything I'm missing there?
Well, I think it's important to say we're both Rivian investors.
Definitely.
Obviously, both bullish on Rivian, and yeah, that's kind of the pretense for for all of this.
Yeah, so we both own Rivian stock, obviously. So we are motivated financially with the company's success, but we obviously only own it because we believe in it. So it's not if we didn't believe in it, we wouldn't own the stock. So we own the stock. We've owned it for a long time now. We do think there's obviously huge differences between Rivian and everyone else in the EV world, other than Tesla, which we'll get into a little bit more in the podcast in a little bit, on why we like Rivian as a company and why we're following it in detail. And maybe actually let's just start there. I mean, basically, Tesla is a very unique company that really made EVs mainstream. And we think they really perfected the blueprint for what a car company should be today. And we think that of all the EV startups that have came out, the only one that's really doing it right is Rivian.
So anyway, to get back to your point, Tesla did a lot of things differently than the legacy OEM car manufacturers, and we like very much that Rivian is following in those footsteps. It's doing the same similar vertical integration, and that I think is a major reason why Tesla was able to persevere and get to the scale production that they're at today.
Yeah, exactly. So Tesla basically really vertically integrated everything. And before Tesla, car companies actually were really like all they actually did was put pieces together. Like they really had very little vertical integration. They would buy from tons and tons of suppliers, different parts. They would basically mash up metal, put all these parts that they bought from tons of other suppliers together, stamp their logo, and basically sell it to a wide range of dealerships. They have their dealership network, and that was pretty much their business. I mean, they didn't have a relationship with the customer. They didn't make the software. They didn't make a ton of the things that go into the car, whether it's chips, whether it's
Headlights,
seats, headlights, whatever. I mean, they really just use tons of
buttons.
suppliers. Exactly. And Tesla basically said, we don't need we like middlemen all around. We can just maximize our profit margins. We can change the entire industry of what you expect margins for a car business to be by vertically integrating, doing everything in-house from A to Z. And then, as much as possible, continuously pushing that envelope further. And then also getting rid of the dealership model, sell direct to customers. That way they have a relationship with the customer. And they, by doing that, obviously get to keep that margin that every dealer would be making. So the business is a totally different business, other than just being electric vehicles versus ICE vehicles. And Rivian followed basically their blueprint with doing the same thing. And the difference really with like Lucid and these other EV makers is that the other ones have not been able to scale the way that Rivian is showing it can now. They've lowered production numbers, they've lowered targets. Rivian has increased their production numbers and increased their guidances for future numbers, and are delivering quarter by quarter more than they said they would, whereas the others aren't. And at the same time, they're making the software, they're making the hardware, they're vertically integrating. They're not just relying on companies like Apple CarPlay, and Android Auto, and they're taking the hard path, but ultimately the correct path, which is why we like them. And obviously, at a much smaller market cap than Tesla, and they don't have to be Tesla. Obviously, we know the market for cars is like 90 million cars a year. Tesla's like strongest ambitions for 2030 are like 20 million cars a year, which we know that in the entire industry, 12 million cars a year or so, I think, is the most Toyota's like ever done as the biggest automaker. So if Tesla gets to 20 million, it'd be incredible. And that's great for them, but there'll still be 70 million cars a year that have to be sold. So the industry is obviously not a one person wins. There's room for a lot of winners. And if you're going to be second place, it's going to be a huge, huge market for second place. And we think that you need to really succeed in this industry. You need certain things that we really only see Tesla and Rivian doing. Yeah, exactly. And that even goes beyond the car. I mean, even with the ecosystem of chargers, like when you're getting an EV, you need a charger. We know Tesla has the best network, supercharger, which we're going to discuss, North American Charging Standard versus CCS and things a little later, and how everyone's going over in America and to Tesla's NACS port. But Rivian's building the Rivian Adventure Network. They know that they want to also control their own destiny when it comes to charging, provide a great experience when you're using their charging network compared to other third-party networks. And we think that's a really good move and a huge business in the future. So there's that as well. Yeah, so we'll get into NACS. Is there anything you want to say, Dan, before we jump into that? Actually,
no. I actually I think it's probably a good time to say, like, hey, hope we don't lose anybody, but probably important to note that neither Alex or I have a Rivian vehicle. Okay,
this
and
is true.
I think the main reason why, having said that, have driven one, have played with them. They are awesome. Alex even drove the EDV, which I don't know if you're going to be able to somehow put a little clip of you in the delivery van. That was pretty cool.
I did drive the Amazon van from Rivian, the EDV.
Watch you put that as the thumbnail. Like, I drove the Amazon, and that's going to get this podcast going. But anyway, we don't own the cars, and the major reason why is because they don't have they haven't had access up until now to the Tesla supercharger network, which is, as EV owners, we both have Teslas. We know that it's necessary for sure.
For sure, yeah. If you want to do road trips and stuff, having access to a good charging network is vital. And unfortunately, everyone else outside of the Tesla supercharger system has been horrible. Rivian's network has been great from everything I've seen, talking to people, watching videos. The only issue is obviously it's still limited. It's not everywhere, and it's obviously growing. But I love Rivian's vehicles. I've driven them, and I've thought about getting an R1S, but it is, until the adapter comes out, which will come in 2024, and then he'll have access to the supercharger network. It's just makes more sense for a lot of people to have a Tesla, just to have access to that supercharger network that, and I think that was a huge deal that Tesla opened it up, and that Rivian said, yes, let's put the NACS port on our cars in 2025, 2026, going forward. And, it'll be standard on the R2, but it'll also eventually be implemented into the production lines for R1. And everyone who buys an R1 right now will still be able to get an adapter and use the Tesla Supercharger network. And eventually the Rivian Adventure network will also have NACS instead of CCS actual cables as well, since the cars will be using those ports. So everything's moving to NACS. And we actually have some recent news, which is probably, a good time to talk about with NACS, which is that Volkswagen, the one huge car company that had not signed up, actually today, December 19th, that's when we're recording this. If it doesn't come out today, the podcast announced that their brands will now go to NACS. They signed a deal with Tesla so that by 2025, they'll be able to use the Tesla Supercharger network. That this is for all their brands, so Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, etc. That's brand new news. Volkswagen was the one company obviously holding back for a while. And we know that Ford and GM, being the first two companies to sign up with Tesla on the network, was just announced a couple of days ago that it's February 2024 that they'll be able to start using superchargers. So we're not talking, deep into 2024. We're talking 2 months in, 2.5 months from right now. Ford and GM users will be able to, EV users, I assume, have an adapter from Tesla and be able to charge at superchargers across the country, which is huge. And we're definitely excited for Rivian, which signed up not too long after that to get access. So I think Tesla's spokesperson said that they don't want to put everyone at the same time. They don't want to congest the networks. So they're going to do it phase in automakers, I think, based on when people signed up. That's why it started with Ford and GM. And that's why Volkswagen, although it's a massive company, is not going to be able to use the network till 2025 because they were last to sign up.
Yeah. And honestly, can't stress how huge this change will be. I know Rivian is for now. It's still supply constrained. They have more reservations than they have cars, right?
Yep.
And that's going to continue for a while. But as soon as those cars are supercharger compatible, I bet you that waiting list gets extra long.
Oh yeah.
And that's just an awesome place for Rivian to be. Just great situation to be in.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a limited market as a whole for people who can afford, obviously, like the $80,000+ cars. They're, producing. They have, I think, capacity in their Normal, Illinois factory for 150,000 cars a year. We're going to see, they went from 50,000 to 52,000 to raising to 54,000 guidance for this year. We're in their last quarter, so we'll see them do, I think, a little more than 54,000. I think that RJ has, if you listen to him enough, you'll know that he prefers to under promise, over deliver, which I like. It's definitely a little different than Elon's style. Elon delivers, but he's always a little late. So he's got his Elon time. And so I think they'll do a little more than 54,000. I think, we'll see that ramp up to 150,000 happen. We know that there's also a large chunk of unused production capacity for the EDV before Amazon's exclusivity ended, because they can only produce what Amazon was willing to take, since they had that exclusivity, which is now gone. We know they got the AT&T deal, so AT&T is taking Rivian EDVs as a pilot program, and it'll expand beyond that. And I'm sure we're going to see a ton of more pilot programs come out, which is super exciting for Rivian and their commercial van, and also Fleet OS, which isn't on the docket to talk about in episode 1, but just a small thing there. The Fleet OS is definitely something we should talk about, because there's huge opportunities in that, and we'll get into that in a future episode. And basically, they're gonna raise, who knows next year if they do 70, 80,000 cars, but they'll raise it up to 150,000, and then I'm sure they'll try to expand in Normal in some way or form. But we obviously have Georgia factory coming. Yeah, actually today, the contractor who will build the factory in Georgia was chosen, and it's Clayco Inc. So Clayco is going to oversee the construction of Rivian's 1,800 acres, by the way. It's 1,800 acres. And their vehicle production will actually begin in 2026, and that will be the R2, which is extremely exciting, because that's going to be a more affordable $40,000 to $60,000 platform car that, I think is going to open the market for Rivian the same way Model 3, Model Y opened the market for Tesla. So a huge thing from that news article with Clayco being chosen to do that contract for Rivian. They mentioned also it'll be like 7,500 employees at that factory. So that's going to be really awesome for the Georgia market area, just giving jobs. And yeah, a lot of really exciting things surrounding the Georgia factory that I think we're going to start seeing coming into 2024 as they break ground and they start building that.
Agreed. I think that's super exciting. The fact that they're moving on it is that's exactly what you want to see. So hopefully they finish that quicker. So in that article it says there's the factory should be producing vehicles by 22. What is it? What did it say?
2026 will be
2026.
when the start of production for the vehicles will be. So the factory will be finished and they'll be producing cars in 2026. And who knows if their timeline, if they're being conservative or not, but maybe we see it towards the second half of 2025. That'd be pretty cool.
And I love that it's an 1,800 acre plot, because I don't know if you know what happened with Tesla is that they were when they were ramping Model 3, they were trying to desperately to get to the 5,000 cars per week, but they were kind of all tapped out. They kind of squeezed all the efficiency they could out of the space that they had, and so in order to hit that target, they ended up building tents outside of the factory.
Yep.
To have a line going out there. Obviously, if you have 1,800 acres, you don't need to do that. Tesla did that because they wouldn't have been able to get approved for more permanent structures. So they used like a loophole.
And that's in the Fremont, California factory.
Yeah, that's the Fremont factory.
And
so 1,800 acres. If they find that, hey, we need more, is there any figure for how many cars?
Yes. So they're basically going to do it in phases. I know of at least 3 phases that will happen. First phase will start off with a capacity of 200,000 vehicles. Phase 2 brings that up to 400,000 vehicles. And I might have to double check, but I believe phase 3 brings it up to 600,000 vehicles. I know for sure phase 1 is 200,000 and then phase 2, 400,000. And
man, how different will these conversations be once Rivian is delivering,
500,000 plus cars? Yeah, it's going to be a different story. I mean, the community is already really amazing and growing. And I mean, when there's 500,000 additional Rivian drivers on the road every year and growing that number yearly, the community is obviously going to just expand, and it'll be good to look back and see, what's happened with Rivian along the way and how everything has unfolded. And I think a lot of people are really not giving Rivian the benefit of the doubt that I think they do deserve for the team they've built and what they were able to create, because it's not easy. I mean, every other EV startup that's tried and car companies that have tried, they all have failed. And one thing that money can't do is create a community and a brand that resonates with people. That has to just happen on its own organically. So, you could take Lucid, who's selling a lot less vehicles than Rivian is, and they have to pay for advertisements, and they're not selling the number that they'd like to be selling. And we're talking extremely low volume. They can't find the sales for them. And it's because their brand hasn't resonated with people and the community hasn't been built the way that Rivian's word of mouth community works. I mean, it's a huge reason Tesla was able to go until recently without advertising, was simply that every time Tesla sold a vehicle, the buyer talked to his friends and family and told everyone how much he loved it, and was a free advertisement to basically get additional sales. So the more they sold, the more demand they would get, and it would create this domino effect, building out that community. And Rivian is achieving that, I think, in early stages right now that no one else has been able to do. So it's an extremely bullish thing for the company that you really can't buy.
Yeah, definitely. If you create a product that provides value in excess of what the cost is, then it's going to sell itself. People are going to be lining up just like they are for Rivian vehicles today, which, like we said, have this certain disadvantages, like not being on the supercharger network yet. They're still lining up. They're still you know, can't wait to, people are waiting a year and a half, 2 years, whatever plus to get their vehicles. And they want to do that because they know it's an awesome product. Um, I, if you're watching this podcast, I assume that you've seen some Rivian videos on YouTube or around social media. Most of the car reviewers, Doug DeMuro, you got MKBHD, they're all blown away by Rivian's
Yeah.
trucks. I mean, they're insane. They they put them in a league of their own. They're like, you know, all of the all of the things that Tesla, because Tesla obviously they're great, but there's a certain something to the super simplistic uh, kind of cost, what do we call it, cost saving strategies that they have going, where they they are not. It's almost like Teslas are not trying to optimize the user experience. They're just trying to, give the best value vehicle, I guess. Whereas
Yeah.
Rivian is doing everything to give an amazing user experience, and that's what we see, and that's why the community exists, because, like you said, it's word of mouth. It's like, you get in your neighbor's Rivian, and it's just light years ahead of your F-150 that you've been driving for the last 12 years. You're gonna probably want a Rivian. It's so much
100%.
better.
Yeah,
You know?
for sure, for sure. And I really think that difference is it's massive when you're driving a Tesla or a Rivian for a long time, and then you get into, like you said, an ICE vehicle, a car from the past, and you just, I mean, everything from the way it drives, one pedal driving, being able to just not even touch the brake, come to a full stop with that regenerative braking, and then to the software, obviously, just, I mean, even simple things where like certain cars, the GPS is so bad, you'll have to like put an address. You can't even write the name of a place, like what you're typically used to on an iPhone. Like, and, um, over the air updates is, I mean, I think like
Huge.
huge, I mean, such a simple thing for tech today. I mean, you can buy cheap tablets that get updates, right? Yet you can buy a $100,000, $200,000 like Mercedes that when it needs an update, you have to take it to the shop,
Dealer.
and the
Yeah.
dealer needs to update it, that it can't get an over the air update, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So, there's different people, obviously, being the teams that are working on building the products, the software at Rivian, at Tesla. It's just an entirely different, it's a different talent pool than what's currently in legacy auto.
I agree.
So we have a lot to talk about. This is obviously the first podcast we're doing. There's so much to go into, but we want to save that for future episodes. We're going to try to drop an episode every day or two, just till we catch up for a few of the topics we want to discuss with you guys and kind of get off our chests. And then we'll kind of move into, I think, more of like a weekly podcast, probably, just to go over roundup news for the whole week. And I think where we can
movements and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the one thing we can finalize this podcast with is just talking about how insane the stock has went the last week, because
that run was insane.
Rivian's basically I'll pull it up right now, but for a long time the stock not too long, but for a while it was kind of between, let's say, $13 and $18, $17, going between 13 to 15 to 16, 13, 14, 17, whatever. But a few months back, maybe it was $27 a share back in August. And then when it dropped down under 20, it's been from like October till a week ago or so under $20 a share, which we've thought has just been like a blessing to be able to buy up shares. No financial advice here, but this is just our own opinions and what we're doing. But being able to buy the stock, as low as like $13 a share and build out a position when you're in it for the long run was really, I think, awesome. And then when the Fed obviously said they're going to lower interest rates next year, the whole market, especially, high growth type of companies, boomed. And then you take that with the short interest that's in Rivian, which we'll get into probably in episode 2. So we'll talk about short interest in the next episode, because there's really huge potential for there's huge potential
Squeeze.
for a short squeeze. You take that into account a little bit, and the stock every day has went up for the last, I don't know, maybe it's been going up, I think, every day since
At least 10 days. It's
Yeah.
been up in a row.
something like that.
And
Yeah, I mean,
And some really big days in there.
it's up
15%.
55% since November 21st, and it's December 19th right now. So in the past a month, it's up 55%. The stock's currently
Crazy.
$24.35, which is up 2.3% today. Yeah, I mean, it's just super exciting seeing that happen, seeing the stock coming up in such a big way. And I think that's a good way to end this episode. And
Thanks for coming along for the ride, guys.
yeah, and we hope you guys subscribe to the channel, like this video if you enjoyed the podcast. We're going to work on our video and our audio to, after this, we're going to see how it comes out in editing, and we will work to improve it as we go on. So sorry if there's any shortfalls for this episode. We hope you guys stick with us. We hope you comment if you're a Rivian investor or own a Rivian. Let us know in the comments, like this video, subscribe, and be ready for episode 2. The only one that's really doing it right is Rivian. Yeah, I hear you, but it's like muffled.
Still?
A little bit. Go ahead.
How about now? It's exactly the same.
I mean, we can hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you? I can, yeah.
You can. Okay. So we'll cut it to, I guess, you can't hear me?
No, I can.
Okay.
Right. We're good. We're good.
All right. So
somehow put this in the bloopers at the end.
Yeah. All right.